David Cameron at the top of the paper, an almost identical front page for once on the Sunday Times. Cameron declares war on the rebels, the same photograph there. Number 10 in last-ditch bid to woo Boris. We'll be talking a lot about that in a moment. Moving on, The Observer, in probably the most uncompromisingly pro-Cameron front page it's ever run. The choice is in your hands. I believe will be safer and stronger in the EU. A pro-EU paper backing a pro-EU Prime Minister. The most interesting front page, I think, of the day, Mail on Sunday, exposed Gove and Boris in secret EU plot and satisfyingly kind of shady photographs of the two men having a tryst in central London. Brilliant, we'll talk about that as well. Finally, Scotland on Sunday, got a picture of Donald Trump there after his great victory. Don't put UK at risk. And the Sunday People, go unless you're dying, but that is not about Europe. So let's move to the stories that are about Europe. Nick, let's start with the Mail on Sunday there. It is a wonderful Mail on Sunday production, isn't it?
It's splendid, isn't it? Because you've got that sort of grainy photograph. The word exposed, the word secret implies that they're actually having an affair. Now, when you turn to the middle pages, they may be having a political affair, but their wives were both there, we should say, for the benefit of the doubt. Although Mrs. Gove did leave early, leaving Boris and Michael together alone. And there's a hilarious sort of grinning picture of Gove when he suddenly realises the cameras are there and this is going to be printed. I mean, the key is what they agreed at that dinner, isn't it? And did they agree anything? Is Boris Johnson, who we still don't know his view, although I think we do, that he's going to be an outer.
We should say we expect he's going to come out later in the day, probably.
Yeah, is it? And the Sun, Andrew says, Bojo on brink of Brexit, yes. The question is, have we seen a process of careful consideration? Have we seen a process of pathetic procrastination? Or have we seen, as many Tories I know think, cynical calculation, that Boris Johnson simply wanted the theatrics of the will he or won't he moment?
It's been the most extraordinary, and some would say slightly elephantine, dance of the seven veils I can remember.
But in the end, it's what he says matters. And of course, for the people in the country, they will just, who want to leave, they'll just want Boris to be on the leave side.
Bojo becomes Bo-Go.
Absolutely.
And Michael Gove becomes Michael Go.
He's not helped himself, Kate, if I could just turn this, by the Sunday Times has a lovely story where he is alleged to have said to one of his own allies that he was veering around all over the place like a shopping trolley.
Yeah, and I'm sure he is, because the reality is, you know, he's been looking to see what the Conservative grassroots are thinking, and the Conservative grassroots thinking, as I've seen going around the country doing lots of meetings, are so opposed to the EU that he would have been, I think, if he'd any chance of becoming leader, he could not possibly have come out for the Stay campaign.
But have you not slightly given the game away? If this is meant to be about the future of the country, why does he care what the Conservative grassroots think? Forgive me, this man, it is worth remembering, could be our next Prime Minister. Within a year, he will be chosen not by the British electorate, he'll be chosen by a selectorate of Tory members. And this will he or won't he moment may not help him.
But you know, when you look at the whole papers today, and every single minister that has come out is saying, wanting to give their reason why, and the ones who are staying in with heavy hearts and all of that are trying to say, they're all personally, I mean, they're all looking for their own future as
Final thought on Boris, who we think is watching the programme, is going to be watching the Prime Minister's interview later on. Boris.
Looking forward to you joining the campaign to leave.
A very gracious welcome for you there. But actually, the reason it matters is that so far there hasn't been a really national figure in the Conservative Party in particular on the Brexit side. And if Boris threw himself into the ring, he'd be a match for the Prime Minister in those debates. And, you know, that level of argument.
But of course we have got Michael Gove. And Michael Gove coming out and so brilliantly explaining why he was coming out, I think, is really another game changer in this whole thing. And this piece today, nearly all the papers cover it, but it's so clear why he has decided. Basically, it's about sovereignty, beautifully, and it is about sovereignty. It's about actually him saying how personally he found it so difficult when he wants to do things. Yes, Minister, I understand, but I'm afraid that's against EU rules. And, you know, that is to the heart of it.
Nick, let me put this to you. In the end, this is about layers of law, isn't it? That is the fundamental question. Under which laws are we governed? Simon Heve's written a piece. It's under the Lisbon and the Nice treaties, the Maastricht Treaty and the Single European Act. They take precedence over British law as long as we're in. And that is essentially the essence of the Michael Gove.
Well, it's that word that is used often by politicians and almost never by members of the public, sovereignty. It's very striking, that photograph you showed on the front pages. It doesn't say sovereignty, it doesn't say democracy, because even democracy would seem an abstract concept to me. It says control. So the message of the Leave campaign, a script beautifully written, as you say, by Michael Gove, is if we want to control our own destiny, then we have to get out. The message of the other side is essentially our security depends on sharing a little bit of power, whether it's dealing with Putin or dealing with Iran or dealing with climate change.
So it's a
or
visceral, emotional choice in the end, Kate Hoey.
Yeah,
you were at this very famous Grassroots Out big meeting on the night of the deal.
Yes.
And George Galloway was the secret guest, and people walked out as a result.
Well, no, Sunday Times has a story which is actually just not true. It implies that, hundreds of people walked out. The reality is that we were running very late. This is the third grassroots meeting we've done. We've done meetings of 2,300 people, 1,000. This was a big one in Westminster. And George Galloway came on right at the end. A few people did, yes, probably about maybe a dozen, 20 people walked out. But if these people who'd written this story, James Lyons and Tim Shipman, had actually been there, they would have seen the warm response he got. And the reality is, this is in the end, to me, going to be a campaign about the elites, the establishment, the lining up together, the political leaders, the media, all sorts of things. And it's going to be against the people. And we have to work with people we don't particularly like.
Absolutely.
I'm going to work with people I don't particularly like, and others I like quite a lot.
But last time round, 1975, we had Enoch Powell and Tony Benn on the same side, and that didn't do very well for the No campaign.
Things were very different then, because we'd only just joined what was a common market, what was seen as just a trading relationship. Now it's changed so many times with all these treaties you've mentioned, and this is the first time in 40 years the public, the real British public, are getting their say. And that's why all these articles today, even from some of those ministers who are staying on, are which you've got a good example of that.
I think that's one of the most fascinating things in the papers today, really. On the one hand, you get figures that, frankly, are not well known to the public, but may end up being candidates to be our next Prime Minister, Priti Patel there in the Mail, who says, imagine this is a minister saying of David Cameron, in effect, by scaremongering the public, by trying to frighten them to vote to Remain, they're talking down our economic prospects and have no confidence in the ingenuity and entrepreneurialism that is vibrant and dynamic across the country. Then you turn in the paper, also the Mail on Sunday, to someone who's backing David Cameron, Sajid Javed. But he says he's doing it with a heavy heart. His opening sentence is, it's clear now the UK should never have joined the EU.
I know.
And he's in favour.
And if this is the bugle to march people to the voting booths, it's pretty rubbish, it's pretty horrible, but oh dear, we probably better stay. It's not very inspiring.
No, it's not. And Theresa Villiers has done another very, very good piece. And of course, she's particularly important in this because she's the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. And Northern Ireland actually, maybe a small country, but people vote there, and this will be a very, very important part. And she's saying exactly the same thing. She's trying to be nice about the Prime Minister, understandably, but she just simply says, I do not believe the scare stories about our future outside the EU.
I think it raises the really fascinating political prospect that David Cameron may go down in history as the man who saves Britain's membership of Europe. Poll today in the Mail shows a very clear lead for staying in. Lots of different polls, just give me 2 seconds ago. But simultaneously, destroy the Conservative Party. Because
the Conservative Party has been busily trying to destroy itself ever since I was a child on this issue.
Particularly on this issue,
On this issue.
By the way, that poll got it so wrong it was the worst poll in the general election. So I'm not interested in polls.
Sajid's fundamental point, however, is simply, despite everything, the turmoil, the turbulence, if we left, would be too much. And it's very interesting because he's ex-Treasury, and he again is saying that we are on the edge of a big economic downturn. Things are about to get very bloody economically, and this is not the time to get out.
Well, this is the Business Secretary, a close ally of the Chancellor as well, who will have had a lot of pressure from big business, who I'm sure will be saying to big business, Kate, lots of other businesses think different things, but big business, about 80% of the FTSE 100 are in favour, saying, for goodness sake, there is real economic anxiety at the moment. There's also huge security worries in terms of ISIS, Russia and so on. Don't take the risk, is there?
But on the other hand, there's the risk of staying in when we could be, so...
I was just saying, we've quoted everybody this morning, except for David Cameron, who is all over the papers as well, particularly in the Sunday Times and the Sun. It should be you. I would love to write the Sun's headline tomorrow.
He's actually saying here that He believes Sun readers will be the key voters in this. So it's a real tribute to the Sun readers. I think he's going to be mistaken. I think the Sun readers are actually, many of them that I've been meeting, are going to be round wanting to get out.
Headline tomorrow, it's BOGO.
Nice.
Now,
there speaks an ex-newspaper editor.
Can I just bring up something that a lot of your viewers will be interested in? The referendum is actually during the heart of the European Football Championships, where Northern Ireland, Wales and England have all qualified. And that very week of the referendum, we will know whether the three countries have gone on to the next stages. And here in the Sun, of course, they're pointing out double exit in a week. We could have a situation where we leave the EU and our teams all leave, but hopefully we'll be leaving the EU and all our teams will be going through to the next round.
Talking about the voters and things ahead of us, the American elections, Nick, we've always been obsessed by that. Those of us who are political nutters have been watching that. And it's been a really, really extraordinary day yesterday there. Trump romping ahead. We always thought he was going to trip up, no sign of it at all.
Exactly that, isn't it? There was always this moment that, yes, you get this populist, yes, he's successful to
He'll
start.
blow up somehow.
Yeah, the establishment will take control. And once again, the establishment have been proved to not be in control of events, which is good news for Kate and her side of the argument. So Trump, yes, looks like he's on course. Hillary, very importantly, saw off Sanders in South Carolina.
So the establishment does win on the Democrat side in Nevada. And that's very important for her, because if she hadn't won this, people would...
She'd then be finished.
So it's beginning to look like Trump versus Clinton.
Which is extraordinary because, of course, both of them stir passions. The people who love them, but many, many more people, and this is true of both these candidates, absolutely loathe and fear them.
Yes.
And therefore you have an election which is not great for democracy, if that's the choice, because there'll be many, many Americans who simply will not want to vote for either of them. Last thought, Andy, which is that Trump, in many ways, tells us why Boris matters. Not because Trump's politics is the same as Boris, that they disagree on many, many, many things.
Hair
above
is
all,
similar.
hair, quite similar. But what Trump has shown the capacity to do in our media-driven X Factor age is he absolutely obsesses the public, and he draws cameras to it.
Absolutely, and the public are fed up with the polished politicians. That's what's happening in America. I just hope Obama listens to some of these people, and when he comes over here soon, stops telling the British people how to vote in a referendum, because I think that would go down very well.
I hope when he comes over, he comes onto that sofa as well, Kate. Thank you both very, very much. We've covered a lot of stuff, very important.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.